as you watch the video today, make sure that you're taking Cornell-style notes that you can use in your cooperative groups tomorrow to write summaries and write questions. 8.2 is the use of properties of parallelograms. We start with the definition of parallelogram. Parallelogram is a quadrilateral, which means it has 4 sides, and 2 pairs of sides are parallel. The properties of a parallelogram include 4 things. As I say them, I'm going to mark them on the diagram so that you get used to either seeing the words or looking at the diagram for clues. The first one says that opposite sides are congruent. So you might see congruent markings on opposite sides. The second one says that opposite angles are congruent. So you might see that angle C is congruent to angle A, and angle B is congruent to angle D. The third one says that the diagonals bisect each other. The diagonals are drawn in green. If they were going to show that the diagonals bisected each other, you would see that the parts are marked that are congruent. And the last one says that consecutive angles are supplementary. For that one, it's hard to mark on the diagram, so I'm just going to write off to the side that angle B, the measure of angle B, plus the measure of angle C equals 180 degrees. That would show that those consecutive angles are supplementary. In this problem, we need to solve for x and y. We know that we have a parallelogram because the 2 pairs of parallel sides are marked with the parallel markings. If we were going to find, for example, the letter y, we know that opposite angles in a parallelogram are congruent, so y equals 65 degrees. That's one of our answers. We also know that opposite sides are congruent, so that would tell us that x plus 4 has to equal 12, and therefore x equals 8. So using our properties, we were able to solve for x and y. In this problem, we're solving for x and y again. We know that 2x, angle J, is opposite angle L. We know we have a parallelogram, so those opposite angles are equal. 2x equals 50, and x equals 25. The opposite sides, 18, has to be equal to y plus 3, so y equals 15. In this problem, we're going to find GF, which is this side over here opposite the 8, in a parallelogram, which we know we have based on the markings. The opposite sides are equal, so GF equals 8. That's one of our answers. We also need to find all the angles in this parallelogram. We know angle E is opposite angle G, and opposite angles are congruent, or equal measures, so angle G is 60 degrees. We know the consecutive angles are supplementary, so we know that angle H is 180 minus 60, which is 120 degrees. We know that 120 degrees is also angle F, because angle F and angle H are opposite angles in a parallelogram. Therefore, they are equal. Last example in 8.2 asks us to do 4 different things. We know that we have a parallelogram, JKLM. This is another symbol for parallelogram. We need to find the length of NM. NM is half of one of the diagonals. The other half is 2, so we know that NM is 2. We know that diagonals bisect each other in a parallelogram. That's how we knew that NM was 2. Next, we're looking for KM. And KM would be the whole diagonal. Just add those 2 2's together. And KM is 4. Angle JML. JML is this big angle. We know part of it is 30 degrees. We know the consecutive angle in the parallelogram is 110 degrees. And consecutive angles in parallelograms are supplementary. So if we take the measure of JML and we add 110 degrees, that should give us 180. So that tells us that the measure of angle JML is 70 degrees. Next, we need the measure of angle KML. KML is this angle right in here. We know that angle JML is 70 degrees. We just found that amount. We know that 30 degrees plus the measure of angle KML equals that 70 degrees. So the measure of angle KML must be 40 degrees. Okay, that's it for section 8.2. In 8.3, remember that you can stop the video at any time if you need to go back and write anything down. Take Cornell-style notes as you go through the video and be prepared to share those notes when you get to class. 8.3, in this lesson we're going to show that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So we know by definition that if you had two pairs of parallel sides, you would have a parallelogram. We also know by all the properties whether or not we have a parallelogram or not. And all the properties are listed on this page. So you might want to stop the video and write down the properties on this page. Or maybe you want to write down what you didn't already know. On this first one, the diagram shows two pairs of parallel sides. On the second one, the diagram shows two pairs of congruent sides. Now, the sides that are congruent must be opposite each other. The third one shows opposite angles congruent. The fourth one shows one pair of parallel sides marked as parallel and congruent. Notice the other two sides aren't marked at all. We're only talking about one pair of sides in this property. And the fifth one shows that the diagonals bisect each other with the congruent markings. Again, knowing any of these properties are true for your four-sided figure, you can make the conclusion that you have a parallelogram. For what value of x is quadrilateral CDEF a parallelogram? Well, I know that in a parallelogram, the diagonals bisect each other. In this figure, we're given that the distance from C to N is equal to the distance from N to C. So if from F to N, which is 5x minus 8, was equal to the distance from N to D, which is 3x, then we would have a parallelogram because the diagonals would bisect each other. So this is our setup. If we solve for x, we get 2x equals 8, x equals 4, and I'm going to refer back to the question. I was being asked the value of x, so I'm finished with this. X is 4. In this problem, we're trying to find the value of x so that we have a parallelogram. We know that one pair of sides is parallel based on these markings. We're not sure about the other pair of sides, but if they were parallel, then these two angles, x minus 10 and x plus 10, would be supplementary. So I'm going to take those two angles, set them equal to 180 after I add them up, and solve for x. 2x equals 180. X comes out to be 90 degrees. And again, I'm looking back at the question. It asked me to find the value of x. I'm just going to do a quick check. If I put 90 into this expression for this angle, I get 80 degrees. If I put 90 into this expression for x, I get 100 degrees. And just a quick check tells me that those two add up to 180, and they are indeed supplementary.